Hey guys, welcome back to another quick impressions video on another platformer that I completed recently, and that game is Sly Cooper and the Thievius Raccoonus. Is that how you pronounce it? I'm not sure. For making things easier, I'm just gonna call it Sly 1. You know, it's part of the Sly Cooper collection or original trilogy on the PlayStation 3. Although I do have to say I played this on the PlayStation Now service, a streaming service from Sony for convenience. I played it on my PS5, but I do have here the physical version on my for my PlayStation 3. And yeah, this is a game that I meant to play. As you guys remember or may remember, it's been many years, but I did play the Thieves in Time, which was the PS3 slash PlayStation Vita release of that game. And that was the first Sly Cooper game that I completed or beat. So I was excited because I really enjoyed the characters. I really enjoyed the the kind of like the setting, the humor, if you will, the voice acting. For me, it was something fresh because I pretty much grew up on Nintendo platformers, which are a little bit on the silent side. You know, they have a different almost direction in terms of the presentation compared to the, I guess, PlayStation platformers. You know, like the Jack and Daxter games, the Ratchet and Clanks and Sly Cooper games, which have this more like a movie-esque cartoon movie, with a lot of voice acting and character development and all that. So it's definitely a nice change of pace for me. Growing up with traditional Nintendo and Rare platformers to play these I guess different 3D platformers. So after completing Thieves in Time, years ago, I told myself, hey, I want to explore the first three games on that came out on the PlayStation 2, but that never happened up until recently, where I was like, I feel like playing a platformer. Let's go back to the Sly Cooper games, and I'm glad I did. Sly 1, obviously, it's not a perfect game. It's sometimes it's hard to assimilate these older games, now that I'm used to all these modern games and mechanics and graphics and overall, quality of life things that are present in modern games. But I had a pretty pleasant time with Sly 1. Story-wise, it deals with recovering the pages of this mythical book that was passed along by generations of your family. And throughout the course of the game, if you collect all these, like, I guess, bottles that are, collectibles, you get to unlock and find the pages of the and the secret moves of that book. So you learn more skills that are really not completely necessary in order to progress in the game, but they help. They help a lot. There's like a rolling feature where you can use it to attack enemies. A feature where you can like become invincible, so the enemies cannot see you, and so forth. So throughout the game, you'll be unlocking all these I guess new skills and features that are pretty fun to use, but not necessary. I think that the bulk of the game really focuses on your jumping abilities and kind of like your stealth abilities, going around columns, just going by enemies. And typically sometimes you have to sneak around the enemies and then attack from the back and things like that. They go along with the theme of Sly being kind of like this professional thief. That's kind of like his profession, if you will. And of course you have, you're being chased throughout the whole game by Carmelita Fox, which is kind of like your rival. She's a cop, and she's always trying to, chase after you. But there's also like a, I guess romance in between them. So a very complicated situation for Sly and Carmelita, but it adds to the humor and fun of the game. So that's basically the story. You're trying to recover your the pages for the book that your family passed along. So very simplistic story for a 3D platformer, which is expected, obviously. In terms of the graphics, you can't really expect much, although this is this is a remaster of a PlayStation 2 game. So you do have more polish, textures, and I guess HD graphics, if you want to call them that. The game does run on 700p. It doesn't even go to 1080p. So playing this on PlayStation Now really didn't make a difference compared to playing this on the PlayStation 3. because the max quality of PS Now, which is one of the disappointing things of the service, is that the streaming, I believe it's only 720p in terms of the resolution. But for this game, it doesn't make a difference. The games run on 720p, so the graphics are not gonna blow you away or anything. But they did take me back to the the PS2 / GameCube / Xbox era, where graphics were 3D graphics were still improving, obviously, being only the second generation of 3D graphics back then. So a lot of memories just seeing these rough quote unquote rough graphics. At the time they were good looking, but nowadays they're not so much. But having old graphics didn't really bother me, because the game does have this cartoony look that ages pretty well no matter what. But it does lack the detail, obviously, that modern games have. In terms of the soundtrack, some pretty good jazzy tunes here and there, a very solid soundtrack. But to me, the voice acting is where the game takes the cake. As I mentioned before, I grew up being used to the conventional 3D platformers, silent characters for the most part. So I really get a kick out of these 3D platformers on the PlayStation that have a lot of character development and voice acting, like the Jak and Daxter games and the Sly Cooper games are no different. You talking back and forth, with Murphy and all the other, I guess, friends and characters that are part of the Sly Cooper crew, if you will. And the bosses, there's also a very interesting, trash talking between Sly and the bosses. I really enjoyed, I think it was Mrs. Ruby, I think. Loved her character, loved her voice acting. she had this like New Orleans accent. The game takes place in the bayou. A very heavy accent, Sly Cooper. I really enjoyed her section and her boss fight as well, which was like this rhythm section. And that takes me to the gameplay part of the game, which I already mentioned. The 3D platforming is pretty solid, actually. I appreciate this being an older game, from the early 2000s, or it might be even I should have looked at what year the first Sly came. So in terms of gameplay, I think this game has a lot of like quality of life, I guess, improvements, where Sly doesn't have to be super precise. You can use these the circle button to like automatically kind of like hover over a certain like point that is kind of like indicated by like a shiny piece, and that helps a lot in the platforming. You don't have to be like super precise, which is pretty cool. But I did have some I guess qualms with certain platforming sections of the game, where you land in certain shapes, and the shapes are very rough, and your character will like fall into a ledge or into into the void, pretty much. So there are some rough edges here and there with the platforming and the physics detection with the environment. Your character versus the environment. Sometimes when you step up on a platform, it just looks weird, if that makes any sense. But some minor, I guess, rough edges here and there in terms of that hit detection and physics detection. But overall, it's a very solid platforming. The jumping, everything. It's very easy. Sly is a pretty slow character in terms of when he's jumping. You can kind of control him in the air. I do have to say the double jump. He can double jump, but the double jump is like very hard to predict, because the second jump is not very high. So it tends to be tricky. It tends to be shorter and ends abruptly versus any other platformer or platforming game that you ever played. So that's a little bit on the challenging part, kind of mastering or getting used to that double jump technique that's specific to the Sly Cooper games. But other than that, it's a fairly easy game. Fairly easy also to get the platinum trophy. Nowadays I typically don't go for those unless they're somewhat accessible, and in this game, you pretty much have to collect all the collectibles in the game, but they're not very hard. I think even though this is an open 3D platforming game, the levels are somewhat linear, and the collectibles are not are for the most part in plain sight. And of course, if you miss a certain collectibles, you can always replay the levels from like the hub world. So you can always go back and get all the collectibles, and therefore that's pretty much it in order to get the platinum trophy. It's just making sure you you get all the every single collectible within the game. Some frustrating parts, I think, towards the end, the game does get a little bit difficult. Some of the the kind of like the last boss battle was a little bit frustrating, but other than that, overall it's an easy game. I did have some problems with the rhythm game for the Mrs. Ruby boss fight. It was frustrating because I believe the problem stems not only from me playing this on a stream service like PlayStation Now, which adds a little bit input lag and whatnot, but the remastered version here that I have for the PS3, for whatever reason, the timings are off, making that it's an interesting battle against Mrs. Ruby because it's a rhythm game, which I thought it was kind of fun and unique in terms of a boss fight, but unfortunately it becomes very frustrating because of the input lag or whatever that it's native to this remastered version. So needless to say, I was able to beat the rhythm and the boss fight, but it was by luck. Like I was trying to hit some of the notes and I could have sworn I was wrong or late in some of those. So somehow I passed it. I don't even want to ask why, because I did have to repeat that boss fight. I want to say like at least 20 times, but that last one I could have sworn I missed some notes, but the game recognized them. So no complaints here on that boss fight. And the stream service overall from PlayStation Now was pretty decent. The game does drop in quality every now and then. The stream quality is not very strong sometimes in the service, which is a shame, but a little bit to be expected because PlayStation Now is actually only $5 a month. But hopefully they improve that in the future. But overall thoughts, Sly Cooper 1 is a very solid 3D platformer. I'm glad I played it. It has a lot of charm for being an older game. I really enjoy the voice acting. I think there is a lot of redeemable qualities despite being an older game. So yeah, I'm looking forward to playing the second game. I'm not going to dive into it right away. It may be another couple years before I do my impressions video on the second one. But hopefully I'll get to it sooner rather than later, because I really enjoyed the Sly Cooper games, and I think if I had to say, it's probably out of the Sony platformers so far, it's my favorite one in terms of the characters, just the overall theme, you being a thief and the stealth components and the characters in the game, the voice acting. I know it's an unpopular opinion probably, but I really enjoyed the Sly Cooper character world and characters, and so far the 2 games that I played on the series I really enjoyed. So looking forward to Sly Cooper 2 and 3 that are also part of this remastered collection. So with that being said, thank you guys for watching, and I hope to see you all later. Take it easy.